if you really stop and think about the mechanics of how we talk to each other, everyday human conversation sounds incredibly violent.
Oh, yeah, like shockingly violent.
Right. Like just imagine for a second that you are an alien anthropologist. You've, traveled across the galaxy, you're hovering in orbit, and you are just observing humanity.
Trying to figure out how we function.
Exactly. Trying to understand how we convince each other to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So you tune your highly advanced listening devices into this perfectly mundane conversation down on Earth.
Okay, I love this setup.
And you hear someone casually talking about, like, bending their friend's limbs in completely unnatural directions just to get them to eat a crab cake.
All right, it sounds like a medieval interrogation tactic. Or, I don't know, the transcript of a hostage situation or something.
It really does. It sounds utterly terrifying. But then a few minutes later, you tune into a different conversation. You hear people in tailored suits talking about throwing heavy objects at each other in boardrooms. You hear them casually discussing, like, bringing firearms into a corporate strategy meeting or playing aggressive field sports with actual rocks.
Yeah, it's wild. If you take the language literally, it is completely absurd.
It's totally absurd. The dissonance is staggering, honestly. We use the language of physical combat, of blunt trauma and warfare to describe these completely mundane social and business interactions.
And we do it without even blinking. I mean, we are entirely desensitized to the aggression that's just baked into our own vocabulary.
We really are.
We use these phrases as social lubricants, right? Like almost completely detached from the violent imagery they actually conjure up.
Yeah, and that bizarre tension between the violence of the words and the banality of the situations, that is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's going to be a fun one.
It really is. And for you listening, yes, you, the curious learner who is, always trying to decode the hidden layers of everyday life, who wants to understand why we do the things we do, we have a genuinely fascinating set of source materials today.
We really do.
We are looking at a breakdown of this phenomenon from, of all places, an advanced English language lesson.
Which honestly is such an unexpected but brilliant lens for this kind of psychological analysis.
Right.
Yeah, the source material is from a C2 Advanced English Listening Practice Show. It's called the Learning English Podcast, and the specific episode is titled The Art of Persuasion, Advanced Idioms for Master Negotiators.
Yeah, and the hosts of that show make a really interesting point right at the beginning. They note that in a previous episode, they covered diplomacy. They taught their learners the language of tact, the subtle art of politely disagreeing and how to smooth things over.
The gentle stuff.
Exactly, the gentle stuff.
Like the linguistic equivalent of walking on eggshells.
Right. But today's source material is flipping the script entirely. It is exclusively about what happens when you refuse to back down.
When you just won't budge.
Yeah. It is about the language of unyielding conviction. It's about when you want to convince someone to see things your way, period. And our mission today is to deeply analyze 10 specific idioms from this lesson.
And to be clear, we are absolutely not going to treat them as a vocabulary quiz.
No, definitely not.
We're not just defining words here. We are going to use these phrases as like a psychological roadmap to the art of negotiation.
Because the central thesis we really need to establish here, the undercurrent of this entire discussion, is that language dictates thought.
Oh, yes. That is so important.
By understanding both the literal origins and the figurative applications of these specific phrases, you can actually become a much more conscious, strategic, and effective negotiator in your own life.
Because the words we choose to describe our interactions secretly govern how we behave within them. I mean, if you frame a conversation as a battle, you will inevitably fight.
Oh, totally. That is the perfect jumping off point. Because the way these English idioms are structured, like how physical, vivid, and visceral they are, it reveals the hidden power dynamics in literally everything we do.
From convincing your spouse to pick a specific movie on a Friday night, all the way up to navigating high-stakes corporate mergers.
Yeah, and the source actually starts us off right in the realm of the everyday. Because before we can negotiate a billion-dollar corporate buyout, we have to start with the most common daily interactions.
Right, interacting with our friends and family, the micro-negotiations.
The social persuasion that happens in living rooms and group chats. And the very first phrase the source brings up is to twist someone's arm.
Ah, this is a classic.
It is. And the specific scenario they provide in the text is so relatable. So a host really wants to go to a new seafood restaurant over the weekend, but his friend is just feeling lazy.
Like the friend just wants to stay home on the couch.
Exactly. So the host says he had to really twist his arm. And eventually the friend sighs, throws his hands up, and says, all right, you twisted my arm, let's go.
Which is so funny because the source actually explicitly has to warn its language learners not to commit actual physical violence.
Wait, they had to put a disclaimer.
Yeah, they had to put a disclaimer on it, which really highlights just how bizarre the literal translation is to someone who hasn't grown up culturally conditioned to ignore the violence of the phrase.
Wow, that's hilarious. But hold on. The premise of this phrase feels weirdly dark to me when you really think about it.
Oh, definitely.
Like, why do we use such a physically aggressive image, literally torquing a human joint until the person submits in agonizing pain for a harmless scenario like eating seafood?
It's quite a leap.
We're talking about shrimp and crab cakes, and we're using the language of an MMA submission hold.
Yeah, it reveals a somewhat uncomfortable truth about human psychology and, our closest relationships.
How so?
While the source defines twisting someone's arm as persuading someone to do something they are reluctant to do through persistent begging or gentle, friendly pressure.
Gentle pressure.
Right. Gentle pressure sounds very benign. It sounds harmless. But look at the contradiction there. Even in our warmest, most friendly relationships, persuasion is fundamentally a mild form of overpowering someone else's will.
Wow. Yeah, it's an imposition. Even if it's dressed up in a smile and a friendly tone, you are still actively working to dismantle their stated preference.
You are eroding their autonomy. It highlights that underneath the laughter and the camaraderie, there is this microscopic power struggle taking place.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, like when your friend sighs and says, all right, you twisted my arm, we need to look at the anatomy of that sigh. That sigh is a signal of surrender.
They're giving up.
Exactly. They're explicitly telling you, I'm giving up my autonomy in this specific instance because the persistent pressure you are applying has become more exhausting than simply conceding to your demand.
They didn't suddenly develop a craving for seafood?
Nope. They developed a craving for the pressure to stop.
Oh, man. That makes an incredible amount of sense. It's almost like we need the violent metaphor to subconsciously validate the reality of the transaction.
Yes, precisely.
We just made someone do something they inherently did not want to do. We conquered their will, even if the stakes were incredibly low. We acknowledged the subversion of their autonomy by using a phrase that implies physical domination.
And it serves a secondary psychological function, too. By using an exaggerated, cartoonishly violent phrase, we actually soften the reality of the social transgression.
Oh, because it's absurd.
Exactly. We are making a joke out of the fact that we just wore them down. It's a way of saying, I know I'm being annoying, I know I'm overpowering you, so let's frame it as a playful wrestling match so neither of us has to acknowledge the actual friction I just caused.
That is, wow, it's fascinating how much psychological heavy lifting that one little phrase is doing.
It's doing a lot of work.
But, contrast that aggressive, localized pressure with the next concept the source introduces, which feels like a completely different universe of persuasion.
Oh, yeah.
The phrase is to sway someone's opinion.
A total atmospheric shift.
Completely. The source defines swaying as slowly moving back and forth. The specific imagery they provide is like a tree in the wind.
Such a great image.
It really is. It means to gently convince someone to change their mind. The text notes you can sway someone with facts, you can sway them with charm, or in a political example they provide, you could use a brilliant speech.
Though they do cynically note that sometimes even a brilliant speech isn't enough to sway public opinion.
Right, naturally. But contrast swaying with twisting an arm, swaying feels almost invisible. That doesn't feel like a submission hold at all.
Yeah, if twisting an arm is applying direct, targeted friction to a specific joint, swaying is altering the climate entirely.
The climate.
Yeah. Let's look really closely at the imagery of the tree and the wind that the source provides, because the physics of that metaphor tell us everything we need to know about this style of negotiation.
Okay, let's break it down.
Think about how wind interacts with a tree. It doesn't grab a specific branch and pole. It doesn't pinpoint a single leaf. It surrounds the entire organism.
It's just everywhere.
Right. It exerts a continuous, broad environmental pressure.
And the tree naturally bends to it. It doesn't snap. It just leans.
It leans because that is the path of least resistance within the new environment that the wind has created. When you sway someone, you aren't fighting their resistance directly.
You're not twisting anything.
Exactly. You aren't attacking their stated position. You are subtly changing the informational environment around their thoughts.
Ah, I see.
You present facts, or you deploy charm, or you deliver an inspiring speech. What you are doing is creating a breeze that makes their previous rigid stance feel untenable.
You are shifting the atmosphere so that leaning in your direction feels like the most natural, logical thing for them to do.
Exactly, which is such a higher level form of persuasion, because it preserves the other person's illusion of complete autonomy.
Right. When your arm is twisted, you know exactly who forced you. You can point to the person who annoyed you into submission.
Yeah, the blame is clear.
But when you are swayed, you often feel like you changed your mind all on your own. You just absorbed the new facts or the charm, and you organically arrived at a new conclusion.
The roots of the tree remain intact. The core identity of the person isn't threatened. This is why the source notes that public opinion is something you attempt to sway rather than twist.
Oh, because you cannot twist the arm of 1 million voters.
The friction would be catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely catastrophic.
You have to change the political or social climate around them. But, the source also includes that caveat that sometimes even a brilliant speech isn't enough to sway people.
Right, because sometimes the roots are just too deep, or the trunk is too thick. I mean, if someone is rigidly ideologically possessed, a gentle breeze of facts isn't going to move them. They will just stand there rigid until a hurricane comes along.
Or until they break.
Yeah, or until they break.
Which perfectly transitions us out of the realm of seafood dinners and friendly debates.
Okay, where are we heading?
Well, charm, environmental wind, and friendly arm twisting have their limits. When you move into the corporate world, when you step into an imposing boardroom to try and close a massive high-stakes deal with a new client, charm alone is not a strategy.
You need something more.
You need leverage. You need positioning.
Yeah, you can't just blow a gentle breeze across a boardroom table and expect someone to hand over $1 million.
Definitely not.
So the source introduces a term here that is so ubiquitous in business, we barely even think about its literal meaning anymore. Pitch your idea.
Oh, yeah. A classic.
The source defines it simply as a persuasive presentation to sell a product, a service, or a concept.
It is the foundational building block of corporate negotiation. But as you suggest, the word itself is incredibly revealing.
Think about the physics of a pitch. A pitch is a throw, specifically a quick, targeted, forceful throw.
You pitch a baseball, you pitch a tent.
Exactly. It implies speed, trajectory, and a very short, unforgiving window of opportunity. It perfectly reflects the brutal reality of the business world.
Attention spans are virtually non-existent.
0. You aren't delivering a grand philosophical treatise on your idea. You are pitching it. You have a few seconds to gather up all the value of your concept, pack it into a tight sphere, throw it through the air, and hope the person on the other side catches it.
The kinetic energy of the word implies a massive asymmetry in effort. I mean, the burden of performance is entirely on you, the thrower.
Yeah, it's all on you.
The person catching it, the client, the investor, the boss, is just standing there exerting zero energy, judging the velocity and accuracy of your throw. They have all the passive power. You have all the active anxiety.
Which is terrifying. When you are the one pitching, you feel incredibly vulnerable. You are expending energy while they just observe.
Exactly.
And this perfectly sets up the dynamic of leverage, which is the most critical component of any negotiation. The source addresses this with the phrase, to have the upper hand.
Right. They define this as having the advantage or the position of control in a negotiation.
And they use a highly relatable scenario to anchor this concept. Imagine you are applying for a job, sitting across from a hiring manager. But crucially, you already hold 3 other lucrative job offers from different companies.
Oh, that's a dream scenario.
Right. The source points out that in this specific scenario, the employer needs you significantly more than you need them. Therefore, you have the upper hand.
They also mention the housing market, where high demand and low inventory gives sellers the upper hand, but the job interview example is the most psychologically rich.
So let's dig deep into that interview room, because it fundamentally alters the atmosphere. Why does having 3 other offers fundamentally change your negotiating posture?
Yeah, why does it matter?
The person sitting across from you doesn't necessarily know about those other offers. You might not have mentioned them yet. But even if you haven't said a word, you are bringing a completely different, almost radioactive energy into that room.
Well, the psychology of leverage is entirely about the removal of desperation. Desperation.
Yes. Desperation is an incredibly loud, noisy emotion in the human brain. When you are desperate, when you need this one single job to pay your rent or to feed your family or to validate your self-worth, your cognitive load is just maxed out.
You can't think straight.
Your brain is consumed with anxiety, people-pleasing, and a paralyzing fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
You become hypervigilant. You are scanning the interviewer's face for micro-expressions of approval. You laugh too hard at their jokes. You talk too fast.
It's the absolute death of negotiation. It's like dating or buying a car or any marketplace dynamic. Neediness acts like a repellent.
Neediness inherently signals a lack of value. It telegraphs to the other party that you have no other options, which makes them subconsciously wonder why you have no other options.
That's a great point.
But when you walk into that room with 3 other job offers safely tucked in your back pocket, that deafening noise of desperation is completely silenced. Your brain is no longer calculating basic survival. It shifts into a higher gear of optimization. You aren't thinking, please hire me. You were thinking, convince me why I should work here, instead of the 3 other places that already want me.
And that internal monologue physically alters your presence. You become relaxed, your breathing slows down. You actually listen to their questions instead of just waiting to spit out a rehearsed answer.
You're actually present.
Exactly. You project a quiet, unshakable confidence that the interviewer will immediately sense, even if they can't quite articulate why they are suddenly so drawn to you. Having the upper hand simply means you are entirely, genuinely comfortable walking away from the table. The power of walking away is the ultimate, undeniable upper hand.
The physical imagery of the upper hand is so telling. It implies a spatial, topographical hierarchy. You're operating from a higher elevation, you have a better vantage point, you're looking down at the chessboard, while the other person is stuck at eye level with the pieces. You can see the whole landscape.
Yeah, when you have the high ground, gravity does most of the work for you.
So let's assume you've established that high ground. You made your pitch, the wind is blowing your way, and you realize you undeniably have the upper hand. The desperation is gone. How do you actually extract maximum value from that advantageous position?
This is where the source text shows the temperature rise.
Oh yeah, the language stops being about gentle persuasion or throwing ideas around. It starts escalating significantly, gets much firmer and noticeably more aggressive. And the next idiom is to drive a hard bargain.
Right. The source defines this as being an uncompromising, tough negotiator who pushes for the absolute best deal without giving up much, if anything, in return.
The examples the source gives are very grounded. They talk about a real estate transaction, buying a house where the seller refuses to lower the asking price by even a single dollar.
Wow.
Or another example, someone getting a massive 20% discount on an antique table because they relentlessly drive a hard bargain. But hold on, the source explicitly states something that seems contradictory. It claims that driving a hard bargain is actually considered a sign of respect in the business world.
That is fascinating.
I really struggle with that. I mean, if I'm trying to buy a house and you won't drop the price by one single dollar, I don't feel respected. I feel frustrated. I feel like you are being impossibly stubborn. How on earth is that a sign of respect?
I get it. It seems entirely counterintuitive from a social perspective where we are taught to be accommodating. But if we unpack the underlying logic of high-level commerce, it reveals a deeply ingrained philosophy.
Okay, let's hear it.
In professional negotiations, pushing back is a demonstration of competence. Think about the seller who refuses to lower their house price by a single dollar. They aren't just being stubborn to annoy you. They are sending a very clear professional signal.
What's the signal?
They are saying, I know exactly what this asset is worth. I have done the rigorous market research. I understand the macroeconomic leverage I hold, and I am not susceptible to cheap emotional tactics or arbitrary haggling. Oh. They are essentially telling you that the price isn't a suggestion. It's a mathematically derived reality. Precisely. In the ruthless logic of the business world, if you immediately cave and drop your price the second someone asks, you are actually demonstrating weakness. You are confessing that your initial price was inflated, or that you are desperate to sell, or that you don't actually understand the value of your own asset.
Right, because why else would you drop it so fast?
Exactly. By driving a hard bargain, you force the other party to elevate their own game. You are treating them as a sophisticated opponent who needs to bring real, quantifiable value to the table, rather than treating them like someone you can easily manipulate or who can easily manipulate you.
I see the distinction now. The shared adherence to the objective value of the market is where the respect comes from. You respect the asset, and you respect the process of valuing it.
Yes, exactly.
That's like 2 grandmasters playing a championship chess match. You wouldn't respect an opponent who just lets you take their queen on the second move out of politeness. You respect the person who makes you bleed for every single square on the board because it proves they take you seriously as a competitor.
A soft opponent is an insult to your preparation. Driving a hard bargain validates the effort both sides have put into the negotiation.
But, the source draws a very sharp line between that kind of professional, data-driven firmness and the next idiom on our roadmap, which is to play hardball.
Yes, there is a distinct and dangerous escalation here. We are moving from strict boundaries to active hostility.
The source points out that playing hardball originates from the sport of baseball, and it defines it as being aggressive, ruthless, and absolutely unyielding. It is the literal take-it-or-leave-it phase of the negotiation, stripped of all politeness.
And the key contextual detail the source includes is a scenario where terms aren't agreed upon, so a company threatens that they might have to get the lawyers involved and play hardball.
We need to clearly differentiate the psychological intent between driving a hard bargain and playing hardball. Driving a hard bargain, as we established, is firm but ultimately respectful of the marketplace mechanics. It's about maximizing the value of an asset. Playing hardball, however, crosses the Rubicon into the weaponization of leverage. When you threaten to bring lawyers into a dispute, you are no longer just negotiating the fair market price of a house or a vintage table. You are introducing the explicit threat of punitive damage.
You are threatening legal, financial, or reputational destruction.
It's the fundamental difference between a tough merchant and a corporate raider. One wants a fair trade, the other wants a hostage.
And look at the sports analogy it's derived from. Hardball. You are taking a rock-solid, tightly wound sphere and throwing it at high speeds directly at another human being.
Yeah, that's literally what baseball is.
If the other person doesn't have a glove or if they flinch, they are going to get physically hurt. The implication of the idiom is that you are perfectly willing to inflict pain, real consequential pain to get your way. You are no longer trying to sway them with wind, you are trying to knock them over with a projectile.
Which brings us to the absolute peak of this aggressive linguistic escalation, the point of no return. Idiom number 7, to stick to your guns.
Wow.
Yeah. The source defines this as refusing to change your beliefs or your demands despite being under intense attack or criticism. And the example they use is a CEO firmly maintaining his strategic plan, even when the entire board of directors turns against him and criticizes him.
This is a remarkable moment to just pause and look back at the linguistic progression we've charted over the course of this deep dive.
The metaphorical journey is wild. We started with twisting an arm, which is physical, hand-to-hand, almost playground-level pressure, a minor joint manipulation over a crab cake.
Right, very low stakes.
Then we escalated to playing hardball, which introduces organized sports imagery competition, opposing teams, high speeds, dangerous projectiles, the threat of legal action, and now suddenly we are at sticking to your guns. We have escalated all the way from a seafood dinner to literal military combat.
The stakes have been rhetorically elevated to life or death.
Exactly. It implies that the boardroom has literally transformed into a battlefield. When a CEO sticks to his guns against a hostile board of directors, the psychological imagery suggests he is hunkered down in a muddy trench, taking heavy enemy fire, clutching his weapon, and refusing to retreat a single inch.
This idiom celebrates a very specific type of stubbornness in the face of overwhelming opposition.
But it also feels incredibly isolating.
It is the ultimate expression of leadership isolation. If you are sticking to your guns, it inherently means you're standing alone against a majority. You are under siege.
Just completely cut off.
Yeah, it strips away all pretense of collaboration. You are no longer trying to sway anyone's opinion. You aren't pitching new ideas. You have simply decided that your survival depends on remaining perfectly static while everyone else attacks you.
So what happens when that dynamic locks in? What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? When one side is fiercely sticking to their guns and the other side is ruthlessly playing hardball with a team of lawyers and absolutely nobody is budging a millimeter.
That is where the entire negotiation slams into a massive, impenetrable brick wall.
And this brings us to this psychological deadlock and the intricate art of the resolution. The source uses a word that perfectly captures this paralyzing wall: stalemate.
A word heavily associated with the endgame of chess, where neither player can make a legal move. The source defines a stalemate simply as a situation where no further action or progress can possibly be made.
Let's paint the cinematic picture of this agonizing corporate moment. You've spent weeks, maybe months, hammering out the details of this massive merger. Millions of dollars are on the line.
Tensions are high.
Both sides have pitched their grand visions. They've established their leverage. They've driven incredibly hard bargains. They've threatened each other with hardball tactics. And now, nothing.
Just silence.
The momentum is completely dead. Both sides are just staring at each other across a sprawling mahogany table in a glass conference room. The tension must be physically suffocating. Neither side can advance without conceding defeat, but neither side wants to walk away and lose the sunk costs of the negotiation. How do you save a situation that is that fundamentally broken?
That is the defining question of high-level conflict resolution. When you hit a true stalemate, brute force is entirely obsolete. You cannot push through the wall. If you push harder, the wall pushes back equally. You have to find a conceptual way around it.
Right?
And navigating around a stalemate requires a profound psychological pivot from hostile competition back to mutual collaboration. You have to deactivate the threat response in the room.
Which introduces the concept of compromise. The source provides the phrase to meet halfway. They call this the ultimate phrase for compromise. Both sides voluntarily give up a little bit of ground to reach a middle point.
It's very diplomatic.
It is. And they provide a wonderfully simple, concrete math example to illustrate this. They describe selling a car. The seller absolutely insists on $10,000 for the car. The buyer absolutely refuses to pay more than $8,000. They are deadlocked. So to break the stalemate and meet halfway, they agree on exactly $9,000.
It is the most mathematically clean, elegant example of compromise imaginable.
But I want to look at the emotional mechanics of this. Why is arriving at that middle number so deeply satisfying to the human brain? Because if you look at it purely logically, both parties just lost.
Yeah, yes, technically.
The seller failed to get the $10,000 they demanded, and the buyer failed to save the $2,000 they wanted to keep. They both objectively failed to achieve their initial stated goal. Yet, meeting halfway almost always results in handshakes, smiles, and a feeling of success. Why do we celebrate mutual failure?
It comes down to a concept in behavioral economics and conflict resolution that we could call the symmetry of sacrifice.
The symmetry of sacrifice. I like that.
In a stalemate, the primary obstacle preventing a deal is rarely the actual money itself. It is the ego. It is the primal fear of losing face and appearing weak. If the seller drops their price all the way to $8,000, they feel subjugated. They feel like they lost the game and were dominated by the buyer.
Yeah, that hurts the pride.
And if the buyer caves and pays the full $10,000, they feel like they were taken advantage of, like they were the sucker in the transaction.
But $9,000 is perfectly symmetrical.
Exactly. Even though both parties sacrificed $1,000 relative to their ideal outcome, the psychological burden of that loss is shared perfectly equally. Neither person has to endure the humiliation of submission.
It's balanced.
The equal distance traveled to the middle allows both parties to maintain their dignity and their pride. It is a graceful, diplomatic exit strategy from a cognitive deadlock. It deeply satisfies the human ego's primal need for fairness and parity.
I will take a hit, but only if you take the exact same hit.
Yes.
It's almost tribal in its logic. We both bleed a little bit, so neither of us has to die.
That's a great way to put it.
But, as the source points out, human beings are complicated, and sometimes the symmetry of the math isn't quite enough to overcome the hesitation. Sometimes that buyer is staring at the $9,000 price tag, and they are still dragging their feet. And that is when a master negotiator deploys our final concept from the source material to sweeten the deal.
Which is a wonderfully sensory, almost culinary idiom to end on.
It really is. The source defines it as making an offer more attractive by adding something extra to the package. So the car example continues. To get that hesitant buyer over the finish line at $9,000, the seller pivots. He says, okay, I'll give it to you for $9,000, and I will throw in a brand new set of winter tires for free.
A classic maneuver.
The source also gives a corporate example, describing a company sweetening a job offer by giving a new executive 4 weeks of paid vacation instead of the standard 2. What strikes me here is that sweetening the deal isn't actually about changing the core metric, is it? It's about changing the parameters of the game itself.
You've hit the exact psychological mechanism that makes this so effective. That is the genius of sweetening a deal.
Oh, totally.
When a negotiation reaches a stalemate on a core, immovable metric, like the base salary of a job or the sticker price of a car, that core metric becomes a psychological wall. If a company absolutely cannot offer more than $100,000 in salary due to budget constraints, and the prospective employee absolutely refuses to take less than $110,000 due to their ego or their living expenses, they are permanently stuck.
There's nowhere to go.
But sweetening bypasses the wall entirely by introducing a brand new, completely uncontentious variable.
Like the winter tires, or the extra vacation days. You stop fighting over the money.
You introduce a low-cost, high-value external variable to magically alter the perceived value of the total package without anyone losing face on the core negotiation point. Right. Think about those winter tires. They might only cost the car seller $400 wholesale, right, but to the buyer, they represent $800 of retail value, plus the immense emotional peace of mind of being safe in the snow.
That's huge.
And 4 weeks of paid vacation might not cost the company a massive amount of upfront operational cash, but to the employee, it represents invaluable work-life balance and prestige. You are sweetening the deal by actively expanding the pie rather than fighting over the exact same slice.
A brilliant sleight of hand.
Yeah.
You realize they are fixated on this immovable object, so you distract them by offering a shiny, valuable object on the side.
Yeah.
And it works perfectly. It breaks the deadlock, preserves the core price, and makes everyone feel like they won.
It manufactures a win-win scenario out of the ashes of a deadlock. It requires creativity and empathy, figuring out what the other person values besides just the money.
And just like that, analyzing these 10 simple phrases, we have navigated the entire complex life cycle of human negotiation.
We really have.
Let's take a second to look back at the scope of the journey we just went on. We started in the realm of the everyday, exploring the gentle, environmental swaying of opinions and analyzing the mild interpersonal power struggles hidden in twisting an arm over a casual dinner.
Then we stepped into the corporate arena.
Yeah, exploring the physics of pitching ideas into the void and diving into the profound psychological calm that comes from leveraging the upper hand and silencing the noise of desperation. From there, the temperature skyrocketed. We learned the market respect inherent in driving a hard bargain and the ruthless, painful escalation of playing hardball.
We watched the boardroom devolve into a metaphorical battlefield where isolated leaders have to stick to their guns under heavy fire.
Which inevitably led us to the agonizing, suffocating brick wall of a stalemate. But we didn't stay stuck. We found our way out by exploring the psychological elegance of the symmetrical sacrifice meeting halfway and the clever, parameter-shifting creativity of sweetening the deal to expand the pie.
It is truly a complete, remarkably sophisticated psychological roadmap.
And it was entirely hidden inside the everyday language we use without a second thought.
It perfectly illustrates how infinitely layered our communication is. When you look beneath the surface of the vocabulary, you find the entire operating system of human behavior.
It really is an operating system. Now, at the end of the source audio, the hosts of the Learning English podcast leave their audience with a community prompt. They ask their listeners a very direct, revealing question. Do you prefer to play hardball, or are you always willing to meet someone halfway?
That's a great question.
And I want to echo that directly to you listening to us right now. How do you approach the world? When you need something from someone, whether it's your boss, your partner, your children, or a random car salesman, which of these idioms reflects your natural, unfiltered default setting?
Yeah, which one are you?
Are you a swayer, patiently changing the wind? Are you an arm twister, applying friendly friction? Or are you a hardball player, ready to throw rocks?
It requires a brutal amount of self-awareness to answer that honestly. Most people desperately want to believe they are collaborative and fair, but under the heat of pressure, their true default settings inevitably reveal themselves.
And that leads me to one final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. Something that builds on everything we've discussed, but pushes it a step further into the realm of self-programming.
Okay, let's hear it.
We established at the very beginning of this deep dive that language dictates thought. The words we use construct the reality we inhabit. So when we use these intense combative idioms in our own internal monologues, do they merely describe our actions after the fact, or do they actually program our future behavior?
Oh, that's deep.
Think about it carefully. If you constantly pump yourself up by telling yourself you're going into battle to stick to your guns and play hardball today, are you inadvertently turning a potential collaborative partnership, a situation where you could have easily just sweetened the deal and met halfway into a hostile zero-sum conflict?
If you bring a gun to a negotiation, even metaphorically, you really shouldn't be surprised when the other side feels threatened and starts shooting back. You create the war you prepare for.
That is exactly it. You create the war you prepare for. So think about the imagery you use the next time you step up to the negotiation table, whatever that table looks like. Are you preparing to twist a joint, or are you just trying to figure out where to eat seafood? Something to ponder as you go about your week. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. So in 1989, there was this single bluffed sentence in a court boardroom that ended up costing RJR Nabisco like $25 billion.
Oh, wow. 25 billion. That is, I mean, that's just an astronomical number.
Right. It's completely wild. And the sheer audacity of that moment, it really wasn't about the math at all.
No, not up.
Like, it wasn't about the market fundamentals. It was entirely about the psychological mechanisms that really make or break our moments of maximum leverage.
Yeah, exactly. Because when the stakes are literally that high, language totally stops functioning as just a simple transfer of information.
Right. It's no longer just, turn on a tap and watching the water flow.
Right. It becomes this massive mechanism of behavioral control. It's a way to actively shape reality and force a very specific outcome.
Totally. And that's why I'm so incredibly thrilled to bring you into this deep dive today.
It's going to be a good one.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because our mission for the next hour or so is to just completely tear apart the architecture of persuasion and negotiation.
Unpack the whole thing.
Exactly. We are looking at a very specific linguistic landscape today.
Yes, we are.
So our source material today comes from this really fascinating audio lesson. It's titled The Art of the Deal, Advanced Negotiation Idioms.
And it features these two instructors, right? John and Emma.
Yeah, John and Emma. But I want to be clear to you listening. We aren't just looking at this as some standard vocabulary exercise.
No, definitely not. That would be missing the point entirely.
Right. We are treating this audio lesson as basically a blueprint for the psychological warfare of everyday communication.
Which is such a great way to frame it, because the premise that John and Emma establish is just utterly fascinating when you really pause to consider its origins.
Oh, for sure.
Like, corporate boardrooms are always culturally positioned as these temples of pure data-driven rationalism.
Right, like everything's a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Everything is supposedly quantified and logical, yet the foundational language of business negotiation in English, it's ripped straight from a game of pure deception.
Poker.
Yes, poker, a game of calculated risk, asymmetrical information, and basically lying.
It's so true. The strategies of the casino have just been seamlessly transplanted right into the infrastructure of global commerce.
Right into it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you are stepping into a hostile corporate negotiation, or maybe you're just trying to outmaneuver a slick salesperson for a used sedan.
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. Or even just arguing with your kids about what time the television gets turned off.
A daily struggle.
Exactly. These concepts are your primary tools of psychological leverage. They dictate who holds power, who concedes, and who walks away feeling like they haven't been just completely taken advantage of.
Yeah, and to really understand how that leverage is acquired, we have to start at the absolute baseline of any negotiation.
Which is information management, right?
Yeah, precisely. The management of information. Before a single dollar is ever discussed or, a single term is debated, information is the primary currency.
It's the whole game.
It really is, because the initial phase of any deal is characterized by this massive, massive deficit of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Neither side really knows what the other is truly willing to accept, which just creates this highly volatile environment.
And that brings up the first strategic posture that John and Emma highlight in the lesson, which is playing your cards close to your chest.
Oh, yes. The classic poker move.
Right. So think about the mechanics of buying a car. That's the scenario they explore, and it's something I think everyone listening can relate to.
Oh, everyone has been there. Sweating on the dealership lot.
Sweating on a lot, exactly. So
Yeah.
you walk onto the lot, and you have a maximum budget of $20,000.
Right. Not a penny more. Not a single penny more. The absolute worst thing you can do, the thing that immediately just destroys all of your leverage, is to walk up to that salesperson and loudly declare, hey, I have exactly $20,000 to spend today.
Oh, it's a death sentence for your wallet. Because the moment that information enters the shared environment, the entire market dynamic of that specific interaction just totally collapses.
It's gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Suddenly, miraculously, the absolute lowest price the dealer will accept for that vehicle you're looking at becomes exactly $20,000.
What a coincidence, right?
Exactly. By revealing your ceiling, you have anchored the entire negotiation completely against your own interests.
I was actually reading about the anchoring effect recently, and it's just devastating in practice.
Oh, it really is.
The first number thrown onto the table, it exerts this massive gravitational pull on everything that follows.
It sets the entire reality of the room. Right. So your instinct for self-preservation basically demands that you hide that number. You look at the car, you maintain this perfectly neutral expression, and you just ask, what is your best price?
Right. You are forcing them to establish the baseline.
Exactly. While you keep your true resources entirely hidden.
And what's fascinating here is how this behavior perfectly maps onto the concept of information asymmetry.
Right, because someone always knows more.
Always. In literally any market transaction, one party usually possesses more information than the other. So when you play your cards close to your chest, you're actively trying to preserve your own information.
While extracting as much data as possible from the other side.
Exactly. It is a deeply, deeply defensive posture. You are building this intellectual fortress around your bottom line.
You know they'll use it against you.
Right. You are operating on the assumption, and it's usually a completely correct assumption, that the other party will ruthlessly exploit any data you provide.
It's like the default setting for survival in a low-trust environment.
It really is.
But, maintaining that fortress requires a massive cognitive load. Like, it's exhausting.
Oh, incredibly exhausting. You're constantly monitoring every single word.
Right. What you say, what you don't say, and even how your silence is being interpreted by the other person.
Right.
And as John and Emma point out in the lesson, there's a fundamental limitation to this strategy.
Yes, there's a hard stop.
Because if both parties just remain in this defensive crouch indefinitely, the negotiation simply freezes.
It goes absolutely nowhere.
Right. You cannot execute a transaction if both sides are just sitting there staring at each other in total silence.
Which forces a radical behavioral pivot. The defensive posture eventually has to be dismantled, which moves us to the exact inverse strategy.
Laying your cards on the table.
Exactly, laying your cards on the table. This is the point where the strategic withholding of information actually becomes the primary obstacle to success.
Right.
The source text gives this really good example of a $50,000 client budget.
Oh, yeah, the corporate project.
Right, so the parties have been, circling each other, testing the waters for weeks. But to actually finalize the project and get to work, someone has to introduce ground truth into the room.
Right. Like eventually you finally have to look across the table and say, look, we really want to make this work, but our absolute immovable ceiling for this project is $50,000.
You have to make it real.
But I have to push back just a little bit on the conventional wisdom here.
Okay, let's hear it.
So in a highly competitive corporate environment, isn't that level of extreme transparency effectively a surrender?
Interesting.
Like you are actively exposing your absolute limit. And behavioral psychology generally warns against making yourself completely vulnerable to a counterparty whose sole objective is to, maximize their own profit at your expense.
Well, that is the core paradox of cooperation in a competitive environment. It perfectly mirrors the classic prisoner's dilemma in game theory.
Oh, I love the prisoner's dilemma.
Right, because if both sides act purely in self-interest and remain totally guarded, they achieve a suboptimal outcome.
Which means the deal falls apart.
Exactly, nobody wins. So vulnerability in this very specific context, it isn't a surrender at all. It is a highly calculated mechanism to build a bridge of trust.
Oh, I see.
By willingly laying your cards on the table, you're officially signaling an end to the deception phase. You are willingly taking on the risk of exploitation.
Right.
But you're doing it to incentivize the other party to also lower their defenses.
So it's essentially a credibility play.
Precisely.
You're sitting down and saying, look, I am actively disarming myself. Here are the actual parameters of reality. Now let's try to solve this problem together instead of just fighting each other.
Exactly. You are transitioning the entire dynamic. You're moving it from a zero-sum game where one person's game is the other person's loss,
right,
to a collaborative problem-solving exercise. But, and this is a massive but, that transition only works if the other party is actually motivated to reach an agreement.
Right. It requires mutual dependency. They have to want the deal too.
Exactly. Which perfectly transitions us to the much darker side of this equation.
Yeah, things are about to get bleak.
They really are. Because everything we have discussed so far, guarding information, strategically deploying vulnerability, building trust, it all assumes that both parties actually need each other.
It assumes a relatively balanced playing field where negotiation is even a mathematical possibility.
Exactly. But what happens when the underlying market forces completely obliterate that balance?
Right, when the floor just falls out.
You are talking about asymmetric warfare. And linguistically, John and Emma define this in the text as holding all the cards.
Oh, such a brutal position to be on the wrong side of.
It really is. It signifies a state of absolute unmitigated leverage. When one party holds all the cards, the entire framework of information management we just talked about, it becomes totally irrelevant.
Because they don't care what you know.
Exactly. They don't need to hide their intentions. And they certainly don't need to build trust because they have total control over the actual outcome.
But is that even a negotiation at that point?
Good question.
Like, if I walk into a room and the other person just dictates all the terms without any requirement to compromise whatsoever, it honestly feels less like a negotiation and more like, I don't know, a hostage situation.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm just receiving a mandate at that point.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is exactly a mandate. And it is entirely dictated by the mathematics of supply and demand.
The brutal realities of the market.
Yep. The source text provides two stark examples of this that really strip away any illusion of leverage.
Right, let's talk about those.
The first one is attempting to rent an apartment in a city that is experiencing a massive housing shortage.
Oh, man. That scenario is viscerally stressful just to even think about.
It gives you anxiety just talking about it.
It really does. Because you listening, picture this. You walk into the viewing and you want to deploy all your clever tactics.
Right. You've read the books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to negotiate the monthly rent, maybe ask for a fresh coat of paint in the bedroom, whatever. But the landlord holds all the cards.
Every single one of them.
You have absolutely zero leverage because the landlord knows with absolute certainty that there are a dozen other desperate applicants waiting out in the hallway who will gladly pay the full asking price without a single demand.
Yep. The landlord's power in that moment, it doesn't stem from superior negotiation skills. It's not like they're a master debater.
Right, they didn't read a poker manual.
No, it stems entirely from the inelasticity of your demand and the severe restriction of their supply. In that environment, the landlord can simply say no.
And they don't even have to explain it.
Exactly. They don't have to counteroffer. They don't have to explain their reasoning. The structural reality of the market has basically granted them total immunity to your tactic.
Wow. Total immunity.
And the second example John and Emma raise is negotiating with a monopoly.
Which, honestly, amplifies the powerlessness even further.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if there is only one high-speed internet provider in your entire region, how do you negotiate the installation fee?
You don't.
Right. You can threaten to walk away all you want, but where are you going to go? The provider holds all the cards
Because they literally control the entire ecosystem.
Right. For you listening, just consider the physiological response when you find yourself on the wrong end of this dynamic.
Your heart rate spikes.
It does. It induces a massive stress response because human beings are deeply wired to seek agency.
We need control.
We do. So when you realize the other party holds all the cards, your agency is effectively neutralized. Your strategic objective has to shift entirely at that point.
How so?
You're no longer trying to win a negotiation. You are engaged in pure damage control.
Oh, wow.
You are just attempting to minimize your own losses, or maybe you're appealing to the other party's sense of like long-term relationship preservation rather than using any actual immediate leverage.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because when you find yourself in that neutralized position, when you desperately need the deal, but you possess zero actual leverage, human ingenuity, or maybe just human desperation, kicks in.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. If you don't have the cards, you have to engineer the illusion of them out of thin air.
You have to fabricate leverage.
Exactly. Which brings us into the absolute most adrenaline-fueled, high-stakes territory of this entire lesson, the architecture of the bluff.
Yes. We are officially moving from the management of real information into the strategic deployment of fiction.
Pure fiction.
Because bluffing is perhaps the most complex psychological maneuver in any negotiation. It relies entirely on managing the other person's perception of risk.
You know, a bluff always reminds me of a speculative economic bubble.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison. How so?
Well, it's this massive, intimidating structure that expands really rapidly, and it looks incredibly powerful from the outside. And it dictates the behavior of everyone around it. But its entire existence is based on perceived value, not actual market fundamentals.
It's hollow.
Exactly. And the moment those fundamentals are actually tested, the entire structure disintegrates instantly.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. Because to bluff is basically to project a synthetic reality.
Right.
Reality where your position is vastly stronger than it actually is. You are intentionally transmitting what evolutionary biologists would call a false credible signal.
A false credible signal. I love that.
Yeah, you're trying to convince the other party that you have alternatives or resources, or just a sheer willingness to walk away that you simply do not possess in reality.
So let's look at the classic scenario John and Emma use in the audio, because I think it's the ultimate crucible for this specific tactic.
The salary negotiation.
Yes, salary negotiation. So you were sitting across from a hiring manager.
Sweaty palms again.
Exactly. And they have just offered you an $80,000 salary.
Okay.
Now, internally, you might have zero other prospects. You might desperately need this exact job just to pay your rent next month.
Right, your actual leverage is zero.
Zero, but you look them dead in the eye
Yeah.
and you introduce a totally phantom variable. You claim you have a competing offer from a rival firm for $90,000.
Oh, the phantom offer.
Yep. And you state very calmly that if they cannot match that 90, you will have to decline their offer.
Okay, so what you've just done right there is initiate a massive transfer of cognitive load.
Right. You've made it their problem.
Entirely their problem. By dropping that $90,000 bluff onto the table, you are actively forcing the hiring manager into a very complex risk assessment.
Which they weren't planning on doing.
Right. They suddenly have to weigh the absolute financial cost of increasing your salary by $10,000 against the operational cost of losing a candidate they've already spent, weeks of time and resources vetting.
It's weaponized psychology.
It is. You are weaponizing their own loss aversion against them.
But the risk you take on to execute that maneuver, it's astronomical.
It's terrifying.
Because you have completely surrendered control of the timeline to the hiring manager.
You're fully exposed.
Right. You're essentially standing on the edge of a cliff, telling them you're going to jump if they don't give you the money, and just praying they care enough to pull you back. Yeah. But what if they miscalculate? Or, honestly, worse, what if they accurately assess the situation?
Right. What they see right through it.
Yeah. What happens when that hiring manager just looks at you, smiles, and says, you know what? We simply cannot authorize $90,000, so we're going to withdraw our offer, and we wish you the absolute best of luck with the rival firm.
Well, the bubble bursts. Market fundamentals assert themselves with brutal efficiency.
It's over.
In the terminology of the source material, the company has executed the ultimate countermeasure. They have called your bluff.
And when a bluff is called, the devastation is total.
It really is absolute. To call someone's bluff is basically to force their synthetic reality to violently collide with actual reality.
Right. Show me the cards.
Exactly. You're challenging them to produce the physical evidence of their leverage because you've detected some sort of inconsistency. Well, maybe your tone of voice shifted slightly when you named the rival company. Or maybe the hiring manager just happens to know for a factual certainty that the rival firm is currently on a strict hiring freeze.
Oh, that would be terrible.
Right. Whatever the trigger was, they have decided that the probability of you lying is significantly higher than the probability of your phantom offer being real.
Emma provides a really brilliant but kind of horrifying example of this in the review section regarding workplace dynamics.
Oh, the resignation threat.
Yes. So an employee storms into a manager's office. They're highly agitated, and they threaten to resign immediately right there on the spot unless certain demands are met.
It's an aggressive, totally hostile bluff designed to force instant capitulation through panic.
Exactly. They want the manager to freak out.
Right?
The manager doesn't panic. They simply look calmly at the employee, accept the resignation, and ask for their key card.
Boom. It is just breathtakingly brutal. The entire power dynamic flips in a millisecond.
It's like watching a car crash.
It perfectly illustrates the catastrophic failure cascade of an unbacked bluff. Because when your bluff is called, you don't merely fail to get the $10,000 bump or the corner office or whatever you were demanding.
Right. You lose everything else, too.
You suffer a complete and total destruction of credibility. You are standing there having essentially engineered your own unemployment with absolutely no parachute.
Which demonstrates that fake leverage is actually significantly more dangerous than having no leverage at all.
100%.
Like, if you have no leverage, you can at least negotiate honestly from a position of weakness. You can ask for favors.
Right.
But if your fake leverage is exposed, you are just exiled from the negotiation entirely. They won't even talk to you anymore.
Which forces a very sobering realization, I think, for anyone listening.
Definitely.
You simply cannot survive a complex, long-term negotiation on pure adrenaline and fabricated leverage.
It's totally unsustainable.
Right. Living on the edge of a bluff will eventually break you. Eventually, fake leverage has to be replaced by actual, immovable boundaries.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
You have to build an architecture of limits. And this is exactly where John and Emma introduced the concept of deal breakers and the posture of refusing to budge an inch.
Okay, so we're shifting from the illusion of power to the absolute certainty of limits.
Exactly. And a deal breaker in this context is not just a strong preference.
Right, it's not like, oh, I'd really like to have this.
No, it is not a highly desired outcome. It is a fundamental, strictly non-negotiable structural requirement.
It's the floor.
It is a boundary so critical that if it's violated, the engagement is instantly terminated.
You know, in formal negotiation theory, this is deeply tied to your BATNA.
Right. Absolutely. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Right, because if the current deal on the table crosses one of your deal breakers, your alternative, even if that alternative is simply walking away and doing literally nothing mathematically, becomes superior to actually signing the contract.
Exactly. And knowing your deal breakers before you even enter the room, that's really the only psychological armor you have against the pressure tactics of the other side.
Because if you don't know them.
If you don't know them, you're going to suffer from scope creep.
Oh, scope creep is the worst.
It's insidious. You'll slowly concede point after point after point until you suddenly find yourself locked into an agreement that is actively harming you.
And the examples John and Emma provide in the lesson really highlight how deal breakers manifest across entirely different domains.
Right.
Like, John discusses a professional boundary regarding time. He states that a role requiring mandatory weekend work is a strict deal breaker for him.
Right. His weekends are sacred.
Exactly. And it fundamentally doesn't matter if the compensation they offer is astronomical. If the role requires him to sacrifice his Saturdays, the value of that compensation is totally negated by the violation of his core boundary.
The deal breaks.
The deal breaks. And then Emma provides a purely logistical yet equally firm boundary. Yes, the commute. A 2-hour daily commute. She says the prestige of the title, the quality of the team, none of it matters if the physical reality of losing 4 hours a day to a highway violates her baseline requirements for quality of life.
Right. So when you are defending a deal breaker like that, your entire behavioral posture has to harden.
You can't be flexible.
No, you cannot lay your cards on the table, and you certainly cannot bluff. You have to project total immovability.
Which brings us to the idiom they explore here. Refusing to budge an inch.
It is a fantastic physical metaphor.
It really is. You're basically transforming yourself into an immovable object.
Right. It signals a complete halt to all the fluid dynamics of the negotiation. Think about a supplier who is suddenly informed by a massive corporate client that shipping fees must be reduced by 20%.
Oh, man.
Right. The supplier reviews their margins, crunches the numbers, and realizes a 20% reduction instantly puts them into bankruptcy.
So they literally can't do it.
They cannot do it. So they refuse to budge an inch. They absorb the pressure. They absorb all the client's threats about finding another vendor. And they just remain entirely static. The price is the price.
Or think about a software team.
Okay.
They inform their client that the launch deadline is absolutely Friday. And despite the client screaming and demanding additional features at the last minute, the team refuses to budge an inch.
Right. The code needs time.
Exactly. The parameters are locked. But, and here's the inherent danger of this posture.
There's always a danger.
Right. While refusing to budge is absolutely necessary to protect your deal breakers, it is incredibly toxic to the negotiation process itself.
Oh, it's highly toxic.
Because if I refuse to budge on the price and you refuse to budge on the budget, the entire system just seizes up.
It hits a brick wall. And this brings us to the absolute critical inflection point of any high-stakes interaction.
The breaking point.
Yes. You have immovable boundaries colliding with immense sustained pressure. It's basically the application of basic physics to human psychology. When that much pressure builds up inside a closed system, a resolution of some kind is biologically and structurally inevitable.
Something has to give.
Exactly. Either one side suffers a structural collapse, or both sides figure out a mechanism to relieve the pressure collaboratively.
Which perfectly sets up the stark contrast between caving in on one hand and the pursuit of a win-win situation through give and take on the other.
Right.
And I just have to say, the example Emma uses for caving in is so painfully accurate, it almost hurts to listen to.
It's brilliant. It perfectly isolates the actual mechanics of structural collapse.
Yes. She describes this agonizing process of arguing with young children about eating their vegetables.
Oh, it's a phenomenal distillation of the whole concept.
It really is. Because you have a goal. The child absolutely must eat the broccoli.
Right. And the child has a counter goal: 0 broccoli, maximum ice cream.
Exactly. So you apply logic. You apply parental authority.
Yeah.
But the child applies pure, unadulterated acoustic pressure. They scream, they cry, and the sheer duration of the conflict just begins to completely drain your cognitive reserves.
You're exhausted from work already.
Right. You are exhausted, the broccoli is getting cold, your nervous system is literally screaming for relief. And finally, the structural integrity of your parental authority just disintegrates.
You break.
You throw your hands up and yell, "Fine, just eat the ice cream." You haven't actually changed your mind about the nutritional value of vegetables.
No, of course not.
You've simply reached your absolute breaking point. You have caved in.
And the idiom itself is incredibly evocative. Think of a literal roof caving in during a massive blizzard.
Right?
The structure doesn't want to collapse, but the external weight of the snow simply exceeds its load-bearing capacity.
It's physical physics.
Exactly. When you cave in during a negotiation, you are surrendering entirely to the pressure of the opposition. John provides a really good macro-level example of this in the review section regarding corporate labor disputes.
Oh, the strike example.
Yes. A massive manufacturing company faces a worker strike. The assembly lines completely halt. The daily financial losses are just staggering, and the public relations disaster is compounding by the hour.
Right. And the company might fiercely oppose the union's demands for higher wages.
Right. They might have spent months refusing to budge an inch.
But on day 4 of the total shutdown, the financial pressure just exceeds their tolerance.
The roof collapses.
Right. The board of directors caves in and signs the new labor agreement because they literally can't afford day 5.
Which raises an incredibly important question regarding the long-term viability of forcing a capitulation like that.
Yeah. Is it really a win?
Exactly. Is it actually a victory if the other side simply caves in? In the immediate term, sure, yes. The child gets the sugar rush, the union gets the higher wages.
But what about the long term?
Right. Human relationships, and particularly business relationships, have very long memories. Caving in breeds deep, enduring resentment.
Oh, absolutely.
The parent is frustrated by their own lack of resolve, so they're mad at themselves and the kid.
And the corporate board?
The corporate board feels extorted, and they immediately begin looking for ways to, say, automate the assembly line to prevent the union from ever having that kind of leverage again.
It's a completely zero-sum outcome that fundamentally damages the underlying relationship moving forward.
It does.
Which is exactly why the source material aggressively pivots to what is really the absolute gold standard of professional negotiation.
Which is give and take.
Right. The structural opposite of forcing a collapse.
Give and take really represents the Pareto efficiency of a negotiation.
I like that term.
Yeah. It's this active, rhythmic process of mutual compromise. But it requires a really high degree of emotional intelligence because both parties must be actively willing to abandon that rigid posture of refusing to budge.
You'd have to melt a little bit.
Exactly. You identify a variable that is relatively low cost to you but high value to them.
Right.
And you trade it for something that is high value to you but low cost to them.
It's about expanding the pie rather than just brutally fighting over how to slice it.
Precisely.
The source text actually notes that any successful marriage requires an immense amount of give and take.
Oh, any married person knows that.
Right. And the exact same principle applies to global supply chains. If you brutally force a vendor to cave in on their margins every single quarter, eventually that vendor just goes bankrupt and your entire supply chain is destroyed.
Right, you've ruined your own operation.
But if you engage in give and take, say perhaps you accept a slightly higher unit price, but in exchange you get a guaranteed 3-year contract and very favorable net 90 payment terms.
Then both entities actually stabilize.
Exactly. And that mutual stabilization is the architecture of the win-win situation.
Which has unfortunately become a bit of a corporate buzzword, honestly.
Oh, totally. Everyone says win-win.
Right. But the mathematical reality of a true win-win is profoundly elegant. It is an agreement where the final equilibrium actually satisfies the core deal breakers of all parties involved.
Nobody feels extorted.
Exactly. Nobody suffered a structural collapse.
The example provided in the text for this is the implementation of flexible working hours.
Oh, a very modern problem.
Extremely. So a corporation is experiencing high employee turnover, and they're demanding better productivity from the staff.
Okay.
But the employees are experiencing massive burnout, and they demand better work-life balance.
A classic standoff.
Right. So instead of a zero-sum fight over mandatory office days where someone has to cave in, they engage in give and take to create a highly flexible schedule.
And the outcome is a textbook win-win.
Right.
The employees gain massive agency over their time, which drastically reduces their commute stress and improves their quality of life.
And what does the company get?
The corporation experiences a massive reduction in turnover costs, vastly improved morale, and often, ironically, a measurable increase in overall productivity.
Because the workers are happy.
Right. The conflict wasn't just resolved or squashed, it was actively utilized to upgrade the operational efficiency of the entire system.
Okay, so you have successfully navigated this absolute minefield.
You've made it through.
You managed your information early on without freezing the deal.
Okay.
You survived the asymmetrical power dynamics when they held all the cards.
Yep.
You recognized a bluff, and you didn't panic. You aggressively defended your deal breakers without becoming just an immovable obstacle.
Right.
And through highly calculated give and take, you have actually engineered a genuine win-win scenario.
Masterful.
But there was only one final mechanism required to actually end the psychological warfare.
Ah, yes. The transition from the dynamic to the completely static.
The finality of sealing the deal and signing on the dotted line.
Right.
So what does this all actually mean in terms of human behavior? I really, really appreciate the historical context John provides here in the audio.
It's so vivid.
It is, because we use the phrase seal the deal so casually in modern business.
Like, oh, let's go seal the deal?
Exactly. But the origin is deeply visceral and tactile. Imagine a dimly lit room centuries ago. Two rival lords have just spent a week arguing aggressively over land borders and grain taxes.
Right.
They finally reach a verbal agreement. But, words evaporate.
Words mean nothing until they're bound.
Exactly. To bind the agreement into actual physical reality, they take a stick of wax, melt it over an open flame, drip it onto the heavy parchment of the contract, and press a heavy metal signet ring deep into the cooling wax.
And that action, that physical action, was the absolute verification of authenticity and permanence.
Right.
The wax seal was a highly visual, physical manifestation of the end of the negotiation. It clearly signaled to everyone involved that the boundaries were permanently set and the terms were entirely locked.
Today, obviously, we don't carry around hot wax and metal signet rings to our meetings.
That would be a fire hazard.
Probably, yeah. We use digital signatures on PDF documents.
Right.
But Emma brilliantly connects that ancient imagery to the very modern phrase, signing on the dotted line. The physical action is definitely less dramatic, but the psychological shift is entirely identical. And it is massive.
It is the absolute cognitive boundary between chaos and order.
Oh, I love how you phrase that.
Well, think about it. Throughout everything we have discussed, the bluffs, the withheld information, the pressure tactics, the deal breakers, the environment was entirely fluid.
It was constantly shifting.
Yes, it was a chaotic system where variables could literally change in an instant. But the moment your pen or your mouse cursor touches that dotted line,
Yeah.
the fluidity instantly vaporizes.
The negotiation effectively ceases to exist.
It's dead. It's done.
The psychological phenomenon of post-purchase rationalization actually kicks in right here.
Oh, that's a great point.
The anxiety of the negotiation just drops. The game of poker is entirely over. The cards are totally swept off the table. You are now contractually, legally, and mathematically bound to the consequences of every single strategic decision you made over the last hour or maybe the last 6 months.
It forces a total shift in your cognitive posture.
How so?
Well, you're no longer adversaries trying to extract value from one another. You are now official partners, bound by the rigid architecture of the agreement you just finalized.
The battle is over.
Exactly. The battle is over, and the reality of execution officially begins.
Man, it is a really remarkable journey when you step back and look at the entire landscape we just traversed today.
It really covers the full spectrum of human interaction.
Synthesizing the framework John and Emma provided, you realize very quickly that this isn't just a simple lesson about business jargon.
No, not at all.
We have been decoding the fundamental life cycle of human conflict and resolution. Think about the arc we literally just mapped out for you listening. We started in a state of really high anxiety, guarding our resources in a defensive crouch, just terrified of information asymmetry.
Right. And then we examine the raw physiological stress of facing down a monopoly or a landlord who holds literally all the cards, completely neutralizing our agency.
And from there, we dissected the speculative economic bubble of the bluff.
Oh, the adrenaline.
The adrenaline of faking leverage and the catastrophic total loss of credibility when that bubble is finally burst by someone calling it.
And then we looked at the absolute necessity of drawing real boundaries with our deal breakers. The physics of refusing to budge an inch.
Right.
And the structural collapse of simply caving into acoustic pressure from a screaming hodler or crippling financial pressure from a striking union.
Only to eventually find the optimal path forward, the complex mathematics of give and take.
Expanding the pie.
Exactly. Expanding the pie to achieve that incredibly elusive, stable equilibrium of the win-win situation. And finally closing the chaotic system by signing on the dotted line.
It's quite a ride.
It is. And as the source material strongly emphasizes in its conclusion, the objective here is not merely passive recognition. The goal is not for you to, watch a corporate drama on television and just point at the screen when someone says, deal breaker.
Hey, I know that word.
Right. The objective is active deployment. These concepts are the invisible architecture of how human beings navigate competing needs and extremely limited resources.
Yeah, because whether you are managing a literal billion-dollar corporate acquisition or you're just trying to secure a fair price on a $20,000 used vehicle.
Right.
Or honestly, even if you're just attempting to maintain your own sanity during a domestic dispute over bedtime, these are the exact psychological levers you are pulling, whether you actively realize it or not.
To bring all of this completely out of the theoretical and directly into your immediate reality, we want to leave you with a final provocation today.
A little homework.
Yes, mental homework. And this is directly inspired by the question of the day that John and Emma actually used to close out their own audio lesson.
I love this part. I want you listening right now to mentally isolate a specific ongoing conflict or negotiation in your life right now.
Whatever comes to mind first.
Right. It could be a highly visible professional dispute over a major project budget. Or it could be a deeply personal, entirely unspoken friction regarding household responsibilities with your partner.
Okay, got it.
Now, analyze your current strategic posture in that specific conflict. Are you suffering from an over-application of defense?
Oh.
Are you playing your cards so incredibly close to your chest out of a fear of exploitation that you are actively preventing a resolution?
When taking the actual risk of laying them on the table might be the only way to build the trust necessary to move forward.
Exactly. Or, perhaps much more dangerously, look at the demands you are currently making.
Oh boy.
Is your entire stance built on a completely hollow foundation of fake leverage?
Are you currently executing a massive bluff?
Yes. Are you bluffing? And if you are you truly structurally prepared for the absolute collapse of your entire position if the other person finally decides to look you in the eye and call it?